The CV hardness command can be described in one of two ways. The easy way is to say that it's going to allow a CV to have more influence over a curve so that the curve will come to a point at the location of that CV. The harder way to put it, or maybe the more technical way to put it, would be to say that it controls the multiplicity of the underlying knots of the curve. Now, what am I talking about when I say multiplicity? I'm talking about knot multiplicity. How many edit points are on a given point of a curve? Now, by default, when you create any NURBS curve, you have CVs that have a knot multiplicity of 1 in the center, meaning that the curve doesn't always follow exactly where the CV goes. It's like the CV just kind of has a bit of a magnetic influence. The CVs on the end have a multiplicity, a knot multiplicity, of 3. It means there are 3 edit points underneath this CV. That means the curve follows exactly where the end CVs go. Now, you can actually kill this if you want to. As a quick example, and this is not something that I'm going to talk about right this minute, but just to kind of show you what I'm talking about. You can go under Edit Curves, come down to Rebuild Curve, and I know we're not talking about this tool, but don't worry about that. I'm going to switch on End Conditions and kill off multiple knots, and click Rebuild. Now when I come in here to CVs, look at the end CVs for my curve. They're way out here in space, and notice that my curve is no longer following them. What I have done is I have killed off the end multiplicity of my CVs that was there by default. Now, don't worry about that. The part about the Rebuild Curve tool has nothing to do with what we're talking about right now. What I'm talking about is the CV Hardness command located right here. Now, let me create a curve like so, and we'll just click a few points down. And I'm going to duplicate it for an example here in just a minute. When you grab a CV on this curve and you move it, you'll notice you have that typical, you've seen it a million times, sort of influence on the CV where you can move it, and the curve kind of follows it around, but doesn't exactly go right through the CV. The curve is always a little bit separated. If you have this CV selected, and you come down to Edit Curves, CV Hardness, and we can open up our settings. We have full and off, and it's really not going to matter which one of these you choose. The most important guy in here is Keep Original, which we'll switch on for now, and click Apply. Now what this is going to do, among other things, is going to make the edit points visible on the curve. If you want to switch those back off, you need to go to Display, NURBS Components, and switch off Edit Points. But now if we come back in here to Control Vertices again, we can grab that same CV and watch what happens when I move it. It now comes to a point. Now why is this? It's because we've increased the knot multiplicity underneath that CV. And here's what I'm talking about. If I come down here to Edit Points, or knots, look at this, I have 1 selected, 1 knot, 1, 2, 3. I just hit the right arrow key 3 different times, and each time I stayed right on that edit point, meaning there are now 3 edit points located on that same spot, or another way to put it is that that CV has a multiplicity of 3, which is what causes the curve to follow that point so precisely. Make sense? Cool. Now, the thing about the full and off, what you're going to read in the help file is that full is going to set the multiplicity up to 3 for a cubic curve, and off is going to set it back to 1. Something I've noticed, at least when working with cubic curves, which we'll be working with 99.9999999% of the time, is if we select a control vertex, like let's say here, and I have this set to full, you'll notice. So I'll click Apply, we'll drag this over. Now we'll select this curve, same CV, we'll switch this to off, click Apply, and drag this over. Now let's go to CVs and CVs. We'll select the same CV on each side. Notice we get the exact same response. So just something I've noticed. That's why it doesn't really matter which one of these you're going to choose. Now, the Keep Originals option does allow you to get a node, the harden point node, which you can come in and make adjustments to the multiplicity of a given CV. -1 is going to be whatever the default value is to harden up that CV, which is going to change based on the degree of your curve. If you are using a standard cubic curve, then you're going to need multiplicity of 3, meaning 3 control points, edit points. 3 edit points underneath your CV. Also meaning, just kind of going along with that, that you'll have to have 2 CVs on either side of the CV you're editing that have multiplicities of 1. That's where things start to get more complex. Now you can take this and change it if you have Keep Original on, so you have that history. So I can set this to 0, which isn't going to change anything. I can set it back to 1, which is going to basically set the multiplicity, the hardness, if you will, back to standard. This is exactly the way it was a few minutes ago. I can increase it up to 2, meaning that it pinches in a little bit more, or back up to 3, so it's a full point. So just think of this as a way to make a CV have more influence over the curve, so that the curve will flow right into a CV. It's a lot easier to focus on it that way, and a lot easier to think about later on when you're modeling. That's really all there is to this tool, so thanks a lot.